Frosted Pop-Tarts specifically.
Nice.
Well, that's
Not
where all the
really.
vitamins.
Yeah, exactly. It's all right. It was the strawberry one, so there's lots of vitamin C in there, I'm sure. It's all perfectly natural.
All right, well, we're coming up on 5 after here, so why don't we go ahead and get underway. I mentioned to the early arrivals already, I'm going to be off camera, so excuse that for today, but I think we can still get started. So welcome everybody to the April 18th, 2024 edition of the Technical Advisory Council of the Confidential Computing Consortium. We meet bi-weekly to make progress in accelerating the adoption of confidential computing, which helps you protect data in use. We are an open source and transparent collaborative community. Everybody's welcome to participate and join the conversation here. We also abide by the antitrust policy of the Linux Foundation, and you can read more about that at linuxfoundation.org/antitrust-policy.
Can I just say, I'd like to add to that. I've over this the conference I'm at the moment, I've seen this working. There have been talks, by Intel with AMD, by Intel with GitHub, and just it works. We mustn't forget how beneficial this space is and what we can do with it. So yeah, sorry, just a little rant there, or positive rant.
Yeah, no, it's great that we can all. One of the things I've always enjoyed about open source is we can just kind of work together and not have to worry about all the secrets and other interference with just getting things done. Managers,
yeah.
All right, for today, I think our main event is the OE SDK annual update. So thanks, Radhika, for joining. I'm looking forward to that. We have some little updates, I think, on the project pipeline. And I don't know if we have a budget update or not, but we've got that if we want to talk about it. See Ben nodding. And I thought I had it on this list, but we also want to go through the barriers, a document that Mike's put together about barriers to adoption. So I think we can, why don't we hit that right after the OE talk, if that works.
As long as we're not going to be too late with the OE talk, so I don't need to leave a bit early, but only sort of half past, an hour and a half from now. Not.
Yeah. Nice. I think we'll just kind of tuck this project pipeline thing under here, because I think that's the only announcement. Okay, anything else for the agenda today?
I was going to do an ED thing as well. I could do that as part of the barriers if you want. Just put it under the ED update. Thanks.
Okay, and then depending on how we're doing with people's schedules, we might take a look at that glossary, but maybe what we want to do is kind of at least just refresh on what our goal is there, so it's not lingering. We can maybe hit it more directly in the next meeting. Okay, so we don't have anything to vote on today, so we will just kind of glide right over the roll call. And we reach the part of the meeting where if you have not introduced yourself to the community at least twice, we invite you to come off of mute and let us know where you're coming from and your interest in confidential computing.
So I have come here twice. I'm Radhika Chandyala. I am one of the maintainers of the Open Enclave SDK project, and I work for Microsoft. I'm just introducing myself because I don't come here often.
Absolutely, yeah. No, we get to see you for the annual reviews and see you on the mail list. So thanks for reintroducing yourself to everybody live here.
Good morning, Radhika.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I think I recognize everybody's name on the list here, so we'll just go ahead and step forward. But if I missed somebody, feel free to interrupt. That's updated. On the old business, we had a request to look at a document from the GRC SIG. So if you have not had a chance to help them out with your review, please go ahead and do that. And why don't I paste this into chat so that people have ready access to the link. And then we also have a long-running open issue on the mentorship program. And I do not see the people who are leading that work on the call right now, but we'll probably be having that come back as an agenda item in the near future. So appreciate everybody reviewing what we have there on number 223. All right, so for the announcements, I think the only announcement we have is that we have sort of cleared the decks on the project pipeline. Everything's gotten through. Thanks a lot to Ben and Rian for getting everything over the snags that they tend to get through as we bring them on. The last hurdle here was Coconut SVSM. Got through the board vote as of yesterday, so now they are officially a part of the consortium. People can send Jörg and community congratulations.
Then I have a question to this, also in relation to the mentorship from the previous slide. So
yeah.
Do we already have mentors for the new projects? Because I think while we are still figuring out what next to do with the mentorship program, we maybe shouldn't keep the new ones in the dust and have them be without a mentor. Yeah, just because we didn't decide yet what to do, right? So maybe it makes sense to at least have something there already.
Yeah,
for the new
so
projects.
You bring up 2 points here that are good. So we have overloaded mentorship. In I think what this issue is, if we crack this one, is for bringing interns in. Yeah, so this is the one about we're trying to make sure that we ramp new people into the community, and then we encourage maintainers of each project to take care of and coach an intern on a project, and then that internship is funded by various programs. So
I mistook that. I thought that was the one for the project mentorship. Okay, yeah, sorry. Then I mistook that, but I think my question still stands anyway. Then sorry. Yeah,
it is still a very valid question. And we also have open 207, I think, without comments in several months. So back in December. And the observation of this one is that as we add more and more projects, that's going to outstrip the number of TAC members that we have who could serve as mentors to the projects. And maybe what we want to do is switch to a more subject matter expert role for each mentor, so that the projects can come to subject matter experts with questions.
I mean, another thing I'd like to do is to ensure that we have people from those projects attending the TAC meetings, if at all possible.
Yeah, and the original concept with these mentors was kind of acting in that liaison role, and I don't know that was super effective. But it was definitely better than a complete absence of connection.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is a conversation for a proper agenda item, and maybe we can do that in the next meeting. And at the same time, we should go through these new projects, since we've just added so many, and make sure that we've got coverage for them. As I recall, we've had volunteers for 1 or 2 of these, but probably not across the board. So yeah, let's make that an agenda item for next time.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Okay. I think this was leftover text from last time.
Sorry, then I just before the meeting, copy that in.
Okay.
Kate asked, there's a lot of opportunities. So they're a little down, there's a slide. If you'll just highlight to all the TAC members, lots of opportunities for speaking and engagement. We would appreciate if people take those opportunities.
Okay, yeah, thanks for getting that in there. So I'll kind of leave us hovered here for a minute so people are familiar with this. Yes, I recall now Kate mentioning this as well. So I think these are conferences where the CCC is a sponsor to the conference, and we have a talk as part of that sponsorship.
Yeah, so that's not correct for the first one, I think. The first one is where we have a booth and we're going to have a monitor and the opportunity to have demos shown on that monitor.
Thank you.
Correct. The first one is a call for content and the rest is call for speaking.
And panelists as well. So if you don't fancy doing a whole thing, but you'd be interested in being on a panel, there's got a number of opportunities for that, particularly I think in the middle two.
Okay. And has anybody sent this to the TAC list?
What I could do when I send out the mailing list notification after the meeting, I can add this in there as an action item. I also sent it out yesterday with the outreach.
I think it might be worth having as a separate email rather than bring it into the sort of TAC minutes because minutes sometimes one just leaves. But if there's a specific call to action email with opportunities, something like that in the title, might be worth doing.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will be moderating at least one or two of those panels, so I promise to be nice to people if they come along.
Okay.
Not too nice, obviously. Interesting, nice.
No, that would definitely be bi-directional. If I was on one of these panels, that would make it a little bit difficult for you to manage.
I would hope so too, Dan. I would be disappointed if it were anything other than that.
Okay. I think we're up to the update for the OE SDK. So Alec and Radhika, I will stop sharing to give you the ability to present.
I think you got the names in the wrong order on that, Dan. This is the Radhika show, so I will let her do the presentation.
I thought that might be the case.
Although I went alphabetical, I'm sorry.
I think
Okay.
alphabetical is always a safe way to go. Go ahead, Radhika.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. I can't find the window to share as usual when it comes to it. Okay, now I can see it. Okay. Can you see my screen?
No, not yet. There we can now.
There it is.
Great. Thank you so much. So
Could you maybe make it the writing a bit bigger or
Sure.
do it smaller or something? Sorry. That's much better, thank you.
Okay, cool, thanks. So to review, we did an annual report last year, and the Open Enclave SDK is currently in an incubation stage and has published a growth plan for reaching the graduation stage. And this report summarizes updates to the project from last year. So I'm going through all the questions that I found on the website for the annual report. So the updated and additional information for the project submission template since the last annual report. There is actually no update except for the project mentor being Alec Fernandez now. So thank you, Alec. Moving on to the next, were there any questions on that?
No questions, but if Ben or Ryan could update the table where we're tracking those, if Alec isn't already listed there, that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. In terms of progress against the growth plan, we're currently in about a 6-month release cadence and currently on 19.4. We're also making releases whenever there are CVEs that are fixed independent libraries. We continue to actively maintain Open Enclave SDK. We're averaging about 2.3 commits weekly, and CVEs are being mitigated in a timely manner. The cumulative number of contributors and the stars and the folks have increased a little bit since last year, but nothing significant. One pain point is that the community that supports Opti in Open Enclave SDK has shrunk, and the Opti specific code is not actively maintained. And since last year, we have not made progress in attracting developers to maintain the Opti part of the project. The committers are making progress towards the completion of the inclusive open source community orientation. This is currently tracked by an issue, and you can see there are a few people who are left to do it, but they are not very active in the community currently. Over the last year, the committers have added support for OpenSSL 3.1 inside enclaves, TDX attestation verification, tests for Windows Server 2022, and we also released development containers with the latest Intel PSW and also test against the latest PSW. At this point, the OE SDK is not ready to request a vote from TAC to move to the graduation stage. Our CGC has shrunk, but as 2 members have retired and 1 member stepped down, so we need to invite contributors from other organizations to become maintainers and members of CGC. OESDK has not yet published a list of adopters or advertised their logos, and the community in the future can also add support for additional Ts. Were there any questions on the second point?
I have a question about support things. I can't remember what chipsets you support. I know SGX is up there. Which other chipsets are you at, and which ones are you planning?
So currently we don't have plans for additional chipsets. We started off with SGX, and then we also were supporting TrustZone. But that's the Opti side of things, which is not actively maintained currently. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I also have a question. So feel free to reply with, let's put this at the end, because I don't want to discuss something already if you will get to that later. But it's interesting to hear that you are not ready to move to gradation stage yet, because I always thought that Open SDK is Open Enclave SDK is pretty mature already. So can you say a little bit more about what, if you know, and if you can share what Microsoft's plans are to keep supporting Open Enclave SDK, because if there's also no clear plan to go for TDX and SEV, or at least not yet, right? Not shaming, really, just trying to understand the situation. Then at some point we could also reach where SGX kind of uses on the decline, but there's kind of no broadening up, and then you're still not in graduation stage, right? So I also don't think you should be afraid to move to graduation stage, because it's not. I think you would be a good candidate for that, right?
Yeah, that's good feedback. So a couple of things are that we looked into whether we should add support for SNP and TDX, but there aren't really many use cases out there for it that we've heard of. So that's not something that we are actively pursuing this time. At this point, we do plan to maintain Open Enclave SDK and update it so it has the latest crypto libraries and it maintains its security guarantees. But I do accept your feedback that if you're not going to the graduation stage, we can go to the other stage. I don't know the word we use. Can you please tell me what the word was? Was it degradation stage?
No, I didn't mean to say that. I just meant to convey that I think it would be a shame if I don't know, in a few years, right, unspecified number of years, you would say, look, we're not supporting this anymore because it was just SGX and we're not doing this anymore, so now we're retiring, or we go to the retiring stage. I think it was called retiring stage. But then at that point, you didn't even reach the graduation stage. Well, of course, the stages don't really mean that much, I think, technically, right? Because that's not what it is about. But I'm just trying to say that you also shouldn't be afraid of that, right? Like I think it's a good statement to at some point say, look, Open Enclave is like as good as we can make it so far, and I think I would just encourage that.
Yeah, maybe I can correct just in case there's any misunderstandings about some of these things. So usually the difference in maturity levels reflects the corporate diversity of the contributions. Not that open source needs to be like corporation oriented, but the idea is that if one company leaves a project, you don't want the project to die. So we consider something graduated when it's got clear multi-stakeholder support. And then to kind of conjoin that with the OpTE support, I don't think we have our ARM colleagues on the call today, but I would think that perhaps somebody from the ARM community would be interested in reviving the multi-architecture support in OE by getting the trust zone work back on. There also seemed to be an implied statement about SGX popularity in there, and I'll say that with the design of what the SDKs do is you're protecting an application or a portion of an application, and that's wholesale different than what we do with the VMs, and so it makes sense to me that OE would not pursue the VM oriented technologies, but we continue to see a lot of growing interest for SGX and for application isolation because it is a valuable class of use cases.
Yes, it makes a lot of sense to me, and I fully agree that I also think that it's really appreciated that Open Enclave exists and it is so mature. I was really just trying to kind of push back against any carefulness and really trying to say, look, it's not immature, right? I think it's a mature, nice project. But maybe then this was kind of also me misreading the stage part. So sorry for that, Dan. Thanks for putting light on that. I think that my questions may be indeed less on the maturity than on the stage, which is then not relevant anymore.
Let me jump in and say that I think the maturity stages should, or at least what Radhika is trying to say is that the maturity stages need to take into account both the level of support for the product and its maturity, the other in terms of just code maturity stages of an application. But the other aspect is use cases and community uptake. I liked your comment that we should reach out to ARM to see if there's support for OpT. And Fritz, I think it would be really good if we could somehow combine the metrics of uptake, user community uptake. Dan, you said that SGX, you're seeing some increase in uptake. It would be really good if we could get some sort of a measurement of how many folks are actively using OE right now and have plans to continue to use it.
I think the comment was on uptake of SGX rather than OE SDK by Dan, but I may have misunderstood.
Well, I see the two as sort of being related. If there's a big uptake in SGX technology all up, then one would expect a commensurate uptake of OE. I think we need to measure that. What I think Radhika is trying to do, and rightfully so, is to get a sense of how much effort she's putting into maintaining a project with how much uptake there is on the community side. We certainly want to invest in efforts that have a lot of community uptake and are helping to promote confidential computing. And to do that, you have to balance investments against those things that, for whatever reason, customers haven't been as quick to use. So that's, I think, the tough balancing act that Radhika is trying to do as this project sponsor, and I applaud her. they're tough decisions to be made, and we should help her get data to make those decisions.
Thank you all. I really appreciate everyone's inputs. This has been a good discussion. Should I move on to the next point?
Sure.
Okay, so for budgeting purposes, there's no new information since last time, and we have no new budgeting requests. The only thing we might need in the future is some place to host Zoom meetings, because we were hosting Zoom meetings on, I think, Ava's personal account, and we can't do that any longer. So we might come back with a request for that when we have a Zoom meeting. But is there any reason we cannot have a Teams meeting? Because you can join Teams meetings using browsers, and you don't really need to have like Microsoft Teams installed.
You're welcome to use whatever you like. It's simply that if a project needs assistance with video conferencing, that's what the Linux Foundation supports.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so the next we have the results of the license scan, and there is not much to report except that the major piece that we actually worked on was upgrading to OpenSSL 3.1 for finding 4, which said that we used a pre-OpenSSL license. But we still continue to carry OpenSSL 1.1 libraries because some of our partners have not been able to upgrade to OpenSSL 3.1 inside the enclave, because it's not an easy upgrade from 1.1 to 3.1. So while we wait for them, we're still carrying OpenSSL 1.1. The rest of the findings are all related to Opti, and we had proposed a mitigation which has not been put into effect. So at this point, unless somebody comes forward to actually maintain the Opti support, we're going to probably remove the files, because I can't think of another way to mitigate these findings. Okay. On the last point, I noticed that you have a new requirement for an OpenSSF best practices badge, and I'm looking into adding it. I hit a problem because it wanted to access some data which I could not give it permission to, or I thought so, but we'll look into adding it shortly. So that concludes my side of the annual report, and we can take any questions right now.
Well, that's great that you saw the new request that we put in to track the open source security best practices through the OpenSSF badge. There's the one element that you seem to allude to here, which is actually adding the badge to the indicator to the README. Can you say a little bit about work that you've done to assess the security posture of the project following those best practices?
Okay, I have not actually looked into assessing the security posture. For some reason, I thought the badge would do that for me. But can you give me some insight into what the security best practices are? And maybe we're already following them, like we have CodeQL, and we have Dependabot to send us alerts when there are updates, and we have security advisories enabled, and we do notify people when we have CVE mitigations. So can you tell me a little bit more about what else we would be adding?
Yeah, I would very much expect for a project of the maturity level that OE is at, that it will be an easy process to go through the badge. I think there's a couple valuable things in it, but maybe just first the mechanics of it is when you go to the website, it'll let you create a project, and then it's got a checklist that you go through for a variety of categories. And if you're already responding to CVEs on a timely basis, you already have a process for that. It's simply a matter of self-certifying that and checking the box. Going through that list, though, with the maintainers, with the other maintainers on the project, is one of the more valuable aspects of it. So it's not just that, here's a list of things you should be doing, but having everybody recognize and acknowledge those things because often the problems come in because people are unaware of some best practice.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, so I just recommend going through that checklist as a team, and usually having somebody go through it first to check all the sort of obvious boxes. So like if you're on GitHub, that knocks out, I don't know, maybe like 25% of the questions, because it's things like, do you have like open issues, or like openly accessible issues, that is, and things like that. So when you've got the whole code history online and issues and so forth with GitHub, that satisfies a lot of the best practices.
Okay, thank you.
Questions from anybody else?
I'm curious if there's somebody, Dan, that you would recommend on the ARM side that I can reach out to figure out whether this proposed mitigation of removing opt is something that is, you know, not in line with their future plans, if there's something coming up that we should know about. I'm kind of sensitive here because the you know, the anti-collusion nature of this forum, but I kind of would like to work with our friends over at ARM just to kind of see if they can give us some guidance here.
Yeah, so Nathaniel would be the...
Okay.
Yeah, I would start actually with Mark. Nathaniel's specifically, I think, on the CCA stuff. But he'll be able to, start with Nathaniel and say, if not, Mark, can you help me?
Sounds good.
Nathaniel is, after all, the rep for this TAC.
I'll loop him in. Thank you. And thanks for this great presentation, Radhika.
Thank you all for having me. Can I stop sharing now?
No, you have to keep sharing rest of the day.
Okay. So should I send this doc to Ben? Is that what I should be doing? Okay, thank you.
Please.
Yes, thanks again for the presentation there. And thanks for being possibly our longest running maintainer.
Yeah, is that a good thing? Okay.
I think so. I mean, I think I'm impressed by that.
Okay, done.
Commiserations, congratulations, both.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I think the next thing we have is Mike's topic. So the obstacles and the update.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not calling it obstacles, I'm calling it barriers. Maybe if I share that doc, actually. Is there a slide from last time on this? It doesn't matter, I'll share it pretty easiest. So a couple of months ago, came up with something that I thought we should probably discuss, and mentioned it in the GB, and the GB said, well, that's a great thing to talk about, but what about all the other things? So I thought I'd write a quick document, page and a half, maybe 2 pages, to list all the barriers to adoption I could think of. And it turns out that 10 pages was more like it. And one of the things that we need to decide to do is what we should do with this document. And I think the general view is that it's not the sort of thing we want to publish externally, not in this form at least, but it really could be a useful document for internal use to work out what particular things we should be working on, what priorities, what resources we should put onto it. But what I'd love to do is to get people's views on it, to get some contributions, comments, whatever. Particularly if it's not going externally, this is really a good opportunity to comment and discuss this document. And I think that what it'll do is it'll raise some areas and say, okay, well, these should go probably under the outreach bucket. These should go in the TAC budget bucket. Some of these for different SIGs, and maybe we'll deal with the others in different ways. But this is one of the wisdom of crowds thing. This was my first go at it. and I've already had some really very good input from people like Emily and Ron and Dan and some other people and Chris. And I'd just like to open it up to everybody, because if you're in this call, it suggests very strongly that your organization believes that there are barriers to entry and we should be doing stuff about it. So let's please share our thoughts, and I'll take whatever I can from you. Just a quick overview of some of the things that are in here. There's some of them is quite technical, some of them are very not technical. And so, it may not be you who has all of the information in your organization. If not, please share it with other folks in your organization, and let's get the best document out of this we can, or get the best outcomes we can. And maybe we just ditch this document and start a set of different documents or working groups. I don't know, but let's do what we can with this, because I think it's a good place to start. Dan, you've had a good look at this, I think. Any comments you would like to give to that?
I think it's a great document, and like you said, I think it's good for getting our internal alignment together. It's good inside baseball, and that probably makes it less interesting to people outside of the CCC. So with that in mind, I'd encourage people to look at it as a way of, what would we prioritize? And that means maybe not making it an exhaustive list of things, because then it just becomes hard to manage and prioritize there. So, look at it from the perspective of, if you pick the top 3 things that you think were barriers to adoption, what would they be?
Yeah, and the other thing is that these are not all things we've not started work on, or which are already partly gone away. Some of these are absolutely happening, but I just wanted to list everything I could think of. On other things like quantum resistance support, well, that may be a while off, and we're probably going to have to wait for the silicon vendors to get involved with that. On a side note, I had an interesting meeting, as Dan will know, with there's a fairly new project within the Linux Foundation on quantum or post-quantum technologies, and I met one of the guys from there who's, I think, probably going to come and give us a talk about the work they're doing, and possibly how it relates to what we do in a future TAC meeting. His name is Hart Montgomery, and Dan knows him very well, so that'll be an interesting talk, I think. There was also an interesting talk I went to about salsa and supply chain, and using that with TEs. I hope we're going to get some from there to talk to us as well. So anything else about this document? Any questions? Dan, anything I've missed?
Not that comes to mind, but we do have maybe time, if it was helpful, to just grab one of those things and have a live discussion on maybe just one bullet point to kind of get the ball rolling. Okay. Don't feel obligated to do that, though.
Oh, how are we doing for time? Oh yeah, we're not doing too badly. Let me share my screen again, having just stopped sharing it. Sorry. Okay, so let's go to this one, maybe, shall we? So this has already been sort of knocked around a bit by Chris, by Dan, and some other folks. But this is kind of a fairly technical or set of technical questions. So I think talking about, we split this up into TCB transparency, or we've thought about splitting it up, and standard ways to specify trust in components and providers. And then there's availability. Oh no, that's a separate thing, isn't it? Or is that the same level? I've lost track. But let's talk maybe about TCB transparency. So one of the things that we generally believe, I think, as security folks, is that a small TCB is good, and that generally we would like to see everything open source and stable in terms of a TCB. And one of the issues here is UEFI and how that relates to cloud services. And so this is something I've tried to talk about here, and I'd love to hear whether this is a concern that people are hearing, either from customers or just from a technical point of view, or whether it's something people have thought about. And if you're not clear what I mean, I'm happy to expound in more detail. It's all very quiet.
Well, why don't I kind of connect this with some discussion at the attestation SIG? I think I don't want to say it was Greg that brought this, but regardless of who brought it up, I think there's been also a recognition that the measurement of your VM or your application will change over time, and it could be a little difficult for an end adopter to manage a lot of frequent changes. So, how do we address that? Do we address it with a different kind of measurement mechanism that isn't subject to quite as much volatility, or do we satisfy that with a service that can more automatically manage expected values? But it's a conversation that we've had in the attestation SIG, as well as something that comes into the document here. And for those of you that span those parts of our community, maybe that also helps remind some thinking here.
So I look at it from a kind of a different point of view. I agree that is an issue. I think the UEFI issue is a very specific subset of that. And let me just briefly explain why I think that. So when you create a VM in a CSP, typically, unless you ask for a clean VM, i.e. I just mean a vCPU and some memory pages, you're going to get a kind of bootable thing with a UEFI in it, so that you can put a standard, let's say Linux or Windows bootable image, ISO or equivalent in it. And that is very, very problematic if you take the view that you don't want to have to trust the cloud service provider at all, which is one of the points of confidential computing, many would say. So unless that UEFI is fully open, fully auditable, and stable, so that you can make sure that your measurements are the same, then you are losing a number of the assurances that you can get with confidential computing. So there has been some work in open sourcing UEFIs and the visibility there, but I don't know where we are. And if we have any cloud service providers who would like to talk to us about their work in that, I would love to hear about it.
So my own personal take is slightly different than Mike's, although not antagonistically so. I think that the point here is that the pattern we should be looking for is that these are supply chains, and we need some way to establish trust in a supply chain for all of the components that make up a particular computation. And so if, for example, a UEFI is going to be part of that computation, then there has to be some way, someone to endorse it and stake their reputation upon all of the security boundaries in that unit. One of the ways to build that trust is through open source code and transparency, which I also fully endorse. But I think the bigger question is, how do we make endorsement and the verification of endorsements a composable reality?
Which leads me rather nicely to something else I was going to talk about, and I'd forgotten about. If I may,
Chris's hand. Chris,
I'm sorry, I
didn't
realize. Please.
Yeah. I'd be uncomfortable about introducing organizational trust as an acceptable component of a confidential computing solution. I feel like the key advantage of confidential computing is exactly to take trust out of operational practices and put them into something that is technically grounded. And so when I look at a cloud service provider that has components, opaque components in the chain of trust, it raises big questions in my mind, and it's completely contradictory to the whole principle of confidential computing. So I was talking to Kafir about this a couple months ago, and he had a phrase that I liked a lot. It was hardware. I think it was hardware-rooted attestation, and that should be a goal and a principle that maybe we help drive home across all of the cloud service providers. Whether it's achieved with direct boot or some other mechanism is not relevant. The key thing is that you want to see the workload measurement coming up with the hardware attestation, and you don't want anybody else's software services or opaque software pieces in that chain.
I agree. Nathaniel, you got your hand up again.
Yeah, thanks for letting me go first. I want to respond specifically to a point. I was not saying that I don't think these components should be open. I absolutely think they should be open. What I'm trying to get us to recognize is that being open and having a pile of measurements is not sufficient. It is highly desirable, and I think in this case necessary, but it is not sufficient in order to drive trust over time. And it's the time component that we actually have to capture here, which is why we end up with this like pile of measurements and we don't know what to do with it. And so trust over time requires reputational stake. And reputational stake is the thing that I'm arguing is the necessary component of which all of these other components are really good. But I agree with Chris that I don't want it to be merely operational, but I don't think there is any way to solve the overtime component without some reputational stake.
I'm concerned about the word reputational in this context, and you have to be very careful about it when we talk about authorities. But I realise that may be relevant. Alec, I think you're next.
Yeah, I just wanted to get back to a conversation that Nathaniel kicked off, and it's been a month now, and I've been trying to ask more folks and learn a lot about it. It's an area that I don't know a lot about, but when you get down below UFI, there are a lot of pieces that are proprietary and closed source. For example, the circuits on an Intel chip, the firmware that shipped by Intel. And Nathaniel opened my eyes to all of the supply chain companies that are part of our TCB. And so as more cloud service providers are designing and fabricating more hardware, and we're adding that hardware and firmware into the TCB in order to make the products commercially viable, we kind of need to expand our thinking of the TCB beyond just what is in the attestation evidence, but to what is providing the attestation evidence. Those are pieces that are there. I just added something to the chat, which is sort of like a very Microsoft led foundation that is talking about those things, and I'll add some more. And some of this you guys are going to be saying is a little bit on the side of advertising, and it probably is, but I want to put it out there for just for openness, and so that you can give me feedback on it, so I can take it back to the folks and hear the community's response to this very one-sided view.
Thank you, Dan. Before I come to you, Nathaniel, you shared a document with me and Alec, I think. Is there any chance that you could make that into a shareable Google Doc that we could share among the group around endorsing, please?
Yeah, really I'd like to do one better, which is that I'd like to actually present this as a tech talk to a future TAC meeting. So I'd like to do that within the next month. I think the schedule is pretty open. So I'd like to talk about that. Just to add on also to what Alex said, the importance of openness is incredibly valuable when you have ability to verify the deployment artifact and its relationship to that source code, right? So if you can do a verification that a particular binary, for example, was produced from a particular source code in a particular environment, et cetera, then the openness is incredibly valuable. But there are a bunch of pieces in the supply chain that even if we were 100% open, we can't actually verify them. And so the ability to be openness has a more limited value in those situations because it's not verifiable.
Yeah, and of course there's a whole XZ thing as well. XZ.
Right.
Dan.
First of all, Nathaniel, love the idea of the tech talk. Thanks for stepping up to do that. Definitely get you scheduled in here. Second thing was I missed the time aspect of your previous comment. Could you explain what you meant by time?
Sure. So I can take a particular build of something that's in my TCB. It doesn't really matter what it is. And I can authorize that particular build to execute as part of my particular computation. And the problem is you can sort of think of this like game theory in the sense that like you're playing a game with this particular component and you're doing it once. But ethics arise as you repeat the game, right? This is when humans begin to develop ethical behavior, is when they repeat the game. And so it's insufficient for us to just trust a component for a single instance of a computation, because computations are not instantaneous. They are things that happen over time. And the security posture has to be modified over time, meaning that, like, let's take UEFI for an example. If we were trusting this component as part of our computation, and a vulnerability was discovered and the computation is ongoing, then can we dynamically update that? And if we can do a live update, so to speak, of the UEFI, then how do we reevaluate that security stance? And so we really have, yes, we have a starting measurement, but we also have incremental measurements that occur over time that affect the security posture. And so where reputational stake has to come into play is when we have a particular instance and the state move, we can trust that initial state on like a one-off basis. But as that state continues to modify over time, we have to be able to measure the security stance over time. And that's where the time component comes in. Does that make sense, Dan?
Yes.
So
yes,
trust is always contextual. One of those contexts is always time. Two of my colorism, my trust definition, and there's also quite a lot about reputation there. For those of you who've read the book, I think it's worth. I work quite hard on reputation, what it means, and whether that definition is what you're using is exactly the same. Nathaniel, is worth discussing.
I'm not sure if it is or not, but I think the important point here, the reason why you need reputational stake, is because we have no current method to track the measurements of things over time in an efficient way.
Absolutely.
Right?
No, I'm 100%.
And so as a result, we have no repeatable, measurable process to be able to implement this part of the system, which is why our only recourse is reputational stake, or perhaps monetary stake, or some other kind of stake.
Cool. Okay, what I'd like to do is just talk about I'll do an update of some other stuff I've done, if I may, and move on from this. Please have a look at the document. I'd love to hear people's thoughts. But what I wanted to talk firstly is I'm speaking at RSA in a month or so. If you're going to be at RSA, or anyone from your company is going to be at RSA, please speak to Kate George from Outreach. We're trying to staff a booth and get people to work together, and a whole bunch of other things. And we'd love to see you there, quite apart from anything else. Another thing is I presented a talk at OSS North America on Tuesday with Sal, and I stole some stuff from Nathaniel. And so I'd like just to present, and misused it, I should be entirely clear. So what I'd like to do is just present some of those slides so people can see what they think, because I'd like these to become sort of standard things if people like them, and we'll obviously need to update them. But so this is what I came up with. So we've got this idea of pillars of trust, and we've got the hardware and the firmware and the software. And where we want to kind of get to is we've got some derivable properties. which are integrity and confidentiality. Those are the two ones we tend to think about when we're talking about confidential computing. Although there's a couple of others that we can actually derive, it turns out, to do with identity and uniqueness of trusted execution environment instances. And what we need is a couple of primitives. One of the primitives is this hardware-based TEE. And how do we get to that? And this is where I've stolen and misused, possibly, sorry, Nathaniel's concept of endorsers.
This does look very familiar.
Good. Well, that was intentional. This is open source. Bad luck. So at the top we've got a silicon vendor who is endorsing the hardware. Firmware vendor endorses the firmware, obviously, and a software vendor endorsing the software. All that could be an OSS community, and that's kind of the point of the talk, but that's not that entirely relevant here. And the missing piece here, of course, is attestation. And so this is where I've misused things a bit. I've basically said that the attester/verify is in itself a type of endorser, Nathaniel. And they're endorsing the remote attestation. And it's those two things that allow us to derive those properties.
I don't view the attester as an endorser. I view it as a policy evaluator. Right.
Yeah, I want to have some
reason
discussions with you about that generally, though. So as I said, I'm misusing it now. So apologies.
The reason why I say that is that an endorser has to cover a case where there is non-deterministic and non-verifiable behavior. On the other hand, a verifier can be entirely deterministic, and its actions can be verified after the fact.
Yes, I agree. However, I want to break down your slides later on, so that's why I want to have that conversation. Yeah, that's fine. So the last thing I kind of went with here was that
well,
actually.
Can I ask a question on that particular slide there, where I get hung up, and I have where you have the attester, and the verifier being an endorser. That assumes that the attester and the verifier have knowledge about the trustworthiness, the actual functionality of the root of trust that they're attesting. So in the case of hardware, a piece of hardware that has both hardware, firmware, and software, for example, a smart NIC, the attester, the verifier, doesn't have any knowledge about the functionality of that NIC. You give them a golden number and they can verify that, yeah, the attestation evidence matches the golden number. But how do you turn that into any
and this is exactly where this falls down, I think, and these are discussions I want to have. I knocked this up as a way to explain some stuff, and I've not done a perfect job, and these are both very useful feedback points. And I'd love to have them in the context of Nathaniel's discussion.
And by the way,
I love it. No, that's great.
I'm just crediting Nathaniel here. He's the one who introduced this concept. I was just wanting to point it out there.
Yeah, no.
This is why I articulate measurements as machine readable but not human readable.
And anyway, so the last question I kind of went with this is that the community does hardware and firmware as well as software these days, and that's kind of the point. And how do you decide how you build confidence in that, and does it? Yeah, so that was kind of the thinking, but I wanted to share that, and it's as I suspected, I've not done the perfect job, and so I look forward to having a bigger conversation. Nicholas.
Just one other thing which triggered your picture, right, and which we had previously was also the cloud, right? From my perspective, attestation software is one, but we struggle more sometimes on attestating the services, right? Because we have one software being ran by different peoples, and with that, also then establishing that these services are using the software you are envisioning, and how you attestate that endpoint is, I think, something which needs to be considered as well.
Sounds like fun. I'm going to step off now. I step back now. I've had my time and more than I should have done. So thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone. I think, Nathaniel, having that call sounds like a very interesting discussion to kick off. And we can, I think we need to introduce the idea of endorsers and how all this fits together and where attestation fits in it. I think this is a very good piece of work for the TAC to do. I hope that you agree, Dan.
Yes, absolutely. Good conversations all the way around there.
Cool. Thanks. I'll hand over.
All right, thanks. So I think the last piece of agenda we have for today is the budget, and I'm kind of flipping through the slides here to see, do we have a budget slide that you wanted to hit, Ben?
Yeah, I thought it was in there.
It probably is. I'm probably just flipping past it. Let me reshare in any case. Oh, there we go.
Okay, so I think the headline here is just everything's on track. We're not forecasting any issues with the TAC budget. I'm just gonna give you updates, short updates every time we meet. But yeah, things are looking good. Folks are starting to use the travel fund per project, which is great to see. And other than that, everything's on track.
Okay, easy peasy.
Easy peasy.
It does feel like we've moved from a time of we didn't know what to do with money to the point where we're getting really good at using money. So we might need to trim things in the future, but all good right now, full steam ahead.
Exactly, yes.
All right.
Should we encourage projects more to use the test infrastructure, or is this forecast just the current months? What's going on? Because it's very low, right? Like we have more budget for test infrastructure than the projects seem to use.
Yeah, that's correct. Like this budget item, sorry, I realize I'm pointing with my mouse and you can't see that. It was underspent by quite a lot last year. And yeah, that spent forecast column includes actuals that we've already paid and then everything I know about for the foreseeable year. So yeah, as of now, this is very underspent. So yeah, we should talk about how we might be able to utilize this more for projects.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah. That's another good thing, Fritz, to bring up during the project reviews. I think the projects know this is available to them, but that's one of the things that we can do when we actually have them coming in, is making sure that they're aware of everything that we have available to them.
And the other thing I would say is the travel to conferences. When we have a booth like at RSA, like at CCS, we really want to have projects being represented, and so there's travel budget which is largely set aside for those sorts of things, I believe.
Yes, completely. Yeah, we've had some people who are not affiliated with the project want to use the travel budget just to attend a conference or present something that's not directly related. But yeah, the main goal of this is that to get exposure for your project, we want to help you to do that. So those of you who work on projects, work with projects, make sure that your colleagues know that they have resources to help promote their project at conferences that are relevant.
I also want to know why the consortium IT services and collab tools is $4 shy of 10,000. What's that about?
It looks like it's divisible by 4. Not that 10,000.
And 10,000 isn't? Yeah, I mean, come on.
I will default to saying that number predates my involvement on the project. And
That's
leave it
a great
answer.
Does not incur another digit, I guess. I don't know. Okay, I think that is it for today, unless anybody had any last minutes agenda items for us.
No, great. Thank you very much indeed. It's fun. It's a good one.
Right. Thanks, everyone.
Right.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.